I'm Dr. Modupe Jimoh. I'm an associate professor of civil and humanitarian engineering at the University of Warwick, Coventry, United Kingdom. It's a pleasure to be here on the Just for Women Africa platform.
Can you tell us what inspired you to be an engineer?
So there were three key things. One, my love for physics and maths. And then the second one was my love for buildings. When I see buildings, I want to understand the concept of how is this like this? How is this standard? So I was curious about buildings. And so those things informed my decision to then go for engineering because I know I could learn more about buildings through that. And so I chose to study civil engineering because of that. But as I went on with my studies, I became more interested in the water and environmental part of civil engineering. And so at postgraduate level, I did more of that, and I currently work in that space.
As a female leader in STEM, what has been your experience navigating this traditional male-dominated field?
It's been an interesting one. I had a stint in the industry as someone working in the in the civil engineering building space. So that was my first interaction with industry. After that, I also worked on road construction and then road maintenance. And in each of these spaces, as everyone knows, that you have more male colleagues than the female colleagues. So the challenge has always been able to assert that you as knowledgeable as any of the male colleagues, and the fact that you can do a good job just like any other person. You meet colleagues that think that because you're female, because they don't have um, they've not interacted with female engineers before, they try to undermine your mental capacity or the value of your work. So it's just being able to have self-confidence and to be able to stand your ground to say, I'm equally capable of being here and equally capable of doing the work. When I went into academia, I happened to be the first female academic staff in the civil engineering department, but I didn't have much of a problem in that space because most of the other colleagues, they were either my peer or people that were in the place of being mentors. So I didn't find there wasn't that much antagonization within the academics compared to when I was in the industry.
How critical is the role of water resource management in addressing climate change, especially in Africa?
Yes. As the adage goes, water is life. So there is no way we can escape or neglect things that has to do with water. So because water is needed in every facet of life, it is important that we pay attention to it, right from the source that he's talking about, the rainfall, our rivers, our oceans, and to the people and how people get this water and how they use it. And when we then talk about water resources and climate change, they they affect each other one way or the other. So if I start from the climate change angle means that you either have too much rainfall in some places or you have very few rainfall leading to drought in some places. And this is because the climate is changing. There's a difference in how our weather patterns are. And what this means then is in places where you have too much water or too much rainfall within a short period, you need to then provide infrastructures that can cater for this. Often existing infrastructures were built on a different model, on a different estimation of rainfall compared to what we have right now. And in places where there is no rainfall as well, it would then affect the amount of water that is available, for example, for agriculture. And once the land, you don't have adequate water, the land becomes dry, and then you have things like storm, you have dust storms happening, and when this happens, it then affects what the environment is like, and resulting in further um, effect on the climate.
What are the key challenges facing water resource management in urban and rural areas today in Africa?
The key thing would be infrastructure and finance. So in a lot of places, we have infrastructure. The infrastructural development has not gone at the same pace as the increase in population. So you even in urban cities where initially there was pipe-borne water, for example, you've seen this metropolis develop rapidly without the infrastructure developing. So in these spaces, you then have a lot of people without the without centralized water system. And when people don't have centralized water system, what they result to is to provide individualized systems. For example, digging the well. And the unfortunate part is the more wells we dig, it affects the water level and the extraction. The more extraction we do, it affects the water level. And then means that the soil becomes unstable in some places. On the case of the rural environment, most of the rural settlements lack infrastructure, and they not just the water distribution system, they also lack water treatment system. So that means that a lot of people in rural settings then have to go to rivers that are not treated to get their water for drinking, for farming, for washing, everything they need to do. And it gets to, and this leads to them being open to waterborne diseases. And from waterborne diseases, it affects the health of the people. And then it means that there's more money needed to treat ailment. One of the things you would expect is that the government would intervene in these things, but the government would always come back to say they don't have the enough money, the budget is not covering, or even in places where there's money, adequate budgeting has not gone towards water resources management.
How do you see the role of environmental engineers evolving with the increasing impact of climate change?
My role as an environmental engineer has been evolving in the sense that I have had to shift from the traditional method in which I was trained to focus on the maths and the physics and the engineering of water provision or environmental management to the sustainability aspect. And when I talk about the sustainability aspect, I mean looking at how the economic aspect of environmental management and the social aspect. So, to explain that further, if I think about building a water or environmental engineering infrastructure, I need to think about the people that will be affected, not just the structure itself, and then who is going to finance the structure and how the structure is going to be maintained. So if you give a bowl, for example, to people, when the donor exits the place, how are the people going to maintain it? In giving the borehole, or in establishing that, how are the people part of the design process? How are they carried out along such that they can take ownership of this um, products that they are receiving? And then how can they maintain it? So this bringing in the sustainability angle into my work has been the greatest transformation.
How can we ensure that water resources in Africa are managed sustainably, especially in the face of a growing population and urbanization?
Yeah, I think one of the key things with Africa is for us to be able to understand our environment and how it differs from other continents, starting from that. And when I say that, a lot of design manuals that we use were not developed with the African context in mind. So even if we design for infrastructures or design for things that we need in our water and environmental space, sometimes we're still designing as if we're designing for another country. So we need to bring in, we need to look at our education differently and to be able to stand on our own principles to say, this is how things work here and this is how we're going to do it. Another thing would be for across Africa for us to encourage in these indigenous designs and to encourage them and to support them. So there are things that there are places that we can no longer build centralized system. So for example, when I talk about centralized system, we might not be able to get the whole power that a whole city needs from one source. How can we then develop mini hydropower, mini solar power farms to support that comes from the environment? How can we develop mini water schemes that covers, even if it's covering just a couple of zones within a metropolitan city? So these are the things that we need to do to look at how we can make things work within Africa for Africans, and also to look at how we can encourage indigenous knowledge and support them.
What are some of the most effective ways to improve access to clean water in undeserved communities, particularly in Africa?
Yeah, the most efficient way would be to encourage, like I mentioned, designs that are suitable, small scale designs. And so, for example, we've had designs that can use simple water filtration systems that are built on the use of waste materials, developing that for smaller wastewater treatment plant, having things like the life straw. Life straw is just, is a simple bar, like a cigar bar, that helps with water treatment before people get to drink it. So there's simple things that people can just do in their homes, and people can be encouraged to take up in terms of providing clean water to people. Because if we keep waiting to do the big schemes, it will take longer. We need immediate action. We need immediate responses, and small scale is the way forward for Africa.
How is technology shaping the future of water resource management and environmental sustainability?
One key technology development, or some of the things that are coming up, is the use of AI in water resources and environmental monitoring. Uh, in Across Africa, that we have terrains that are difficult for people to access, either because of um, the geology of the place, or because there is war happening in that environment. And so there are concepts now around training AI to be able to monitor what is happening. An example of such is the use of AI in wastewater surveillance and surveillance. One key thing around that's happened across Africa and especially in Nigeria recently is the eradication of polio. And while this was done, a lot of people had to go to sites, even in torn areas, to take sample of the water that's flowing in the environment to use them as to test for polio. So for polio monitoring, you can take wastewater or that is flowing around the environment and test them for the polio virus. So, and often when the environment is dangerous, you have to drop people through the helicopter. They take the samples and they're airlifted almost immediately. And if this becomes difficult, it means that in that environment, you might not be able to take samples. So the use of AI or developing AI for environmental monitoring is one of the key things that are coming up now across Africa and across the world that can change the way water resources and environmental management is being done.
How can policymakers and engineers collaborate better to ensure that water resource management is effectively regulated?
The key to both engineers and policymakers ensuring that water resources management is effectively done is seeing each other as stakeholders in the as seeing each other as stakeholders in getting the task done. And so one way of ensuring that this is done would be engineers communicating in ways that policymakers would understand. So we are used to communicating to fellow engineers, going technical, because yes, the technical is very important. But one of the skills we need to iron is how to effectively communicate a scientific or an engineering task to someone that is not in the discipline, which oftentimes a lot of policymakers are not in the discipline. And on the other hand, for policymakers to understand that they need evidence-based information, evidence-based data that engineers can provide for to make decisions. So rather than just making decisions based on what the news coverage is or what seems to be the trend, to rely on engineers to provide data, evidence-backed data for them. Another thing would also be to support engineers and engineering body to be able to do tasks for the government in terms of consultancies, making it easy to assess any finance that is needed to do a consultancy for policymakers to make decisions. And ultimately, it would be good to embed science communication, especially and science communication and policy development into engineering education across our higher institutions.
What more can be done to encourage women to pursue careers in water resources, environmental engineering, and STEM in general?
Currently, there's a lot of work that is going on across the world where people are encouraging girls and female to study STEM subjects and to increase the uptake of engineering disciplines. So a lot of work is going on already in the space of um, educating the public, encouraging girls to do so. I think where we've recently found gaps is retaining these talents within STEM or within the engineering industry. And this is because even though people come in, the work environment has not um, adapted as much as possible to the fact that we can have females in the discipline. You go to some establishment and they don't, for example, have a separate toilet for their female staff. They don't have a clear cut maternity um, policy for their female staff. There's so many things around making the environment conducive for everyone to work in. It sometimes it can even be the PPE, the protective equipment not being designed adequately, or the company not buying the right equipment for their female staff. And what then happens is when someone stays in this environment for so long, when they get to a stage and they feel they cannot continue, they opt out of the discipline and go to another work sector that is more accommodating. And for everyone that steps out of the engineering discipline, there are people, there are role models looking up to them that gets disappointed, hear about their experience, and then change their mind about coming into the industry. So even if we're preaching at the lower level for people to come in, we must also create an environment that makes it make people want to stay within the industry.
How optimistic are you about the future of water resource management in the face of global challenges like climate change?
I'm quite optimistic because there is no way we can shy away from the importance of water resources and environmental management. And when I say I'm optimistic, it's because I've seen the work and the commitment of organizations such as the United Nations Environmental Program towards anything that has to do with the environment. And when I say commitment, I've seen that commitment in terms of bringing together experts that cut across different spheres and industries to gather evidence about the current trends and to also propose solutions to what we have now and what we envisage in the future. So that's one organization. Apart from that, a couple of government are now taking environment, the impact on the environment seriously. We have the various COP programs that happen yearly. So we there is more information now in the public space around climate change, around what we can do in the environment, and then we're making people more conscious of the choices they make and how it affects the environment. So considering that there is more knowledge out there, there is more people are more informed. A lot of people there's greater buy-in into making our environment a better place. I believe that the future of water resources and environmental management is quite optimistic.
What do you think the most pressing environmental challenges will be in the next decade, and how can engineers help address them?
In the next decade, it would be that considering that now the impact of climate change has been unpredictable. So it means that in places that there were no crises before, we've seen unprecedented crises. When I say crisis, I mean environmental crisis this time around. So that's a big challenge because even if you forecast, there is an element of uncertainty in what would eventually happen and how you can prepare for it. That's one aspect. Another challenge is the increase of conflict and wars, because in places where you already have infrastructures, they are being destroyed at unprecedented level. So it means that these places that you thought were already okay in terms of their water resources and environmental management are back to square one, or even if there's anything beyond that, because now they have to clear all or everything that has been destroyed due to various wars going across the world, and then have to restart and rebuild one from scratch. So conflict is a major challenge, and the unpredictable effect of climate change is also a major challenge.
What is your vision for the future of sustainable water resource management, both in Africa and globally?
My vision would be a space where we have different disciplines being able to work collaboratively together, understanding the value that everyone brings to the table in trying to make sure that any change or is sustainable. It's not a one-way stream. It doesn't belong to just one group of people. It belongs to different people and different disciplines. So my vision would be a space where everyone can come together and where we can also honor indigenous and local knowledge for people, um, in trying to ensure that we maintain and preserve our environment as much as possible.
What has been the most rewarding part of your career as a professor in this field?
So the most rewarding part of my work has been to see people grow, to meet young people, invest in their knowledge, invest in their development, and to see them blossom after a couple of years. So capacity development has been a very strong desire of mine, and I'm happy to have seen the fruit of this and to still be able to be in that space where I can um, help people develop within and outside of the water and environmental sector.